Hello, I'm Cathy, this is Luna Bird Book Club and I want to talk about The Salt Path. I should start by saying that I wrote some notes on my phone for this video and then I've given my phone to Orla to play with, so if I'm imprecise it is because I've separated myself from my notes and I've only got myself to blame. So The Salt Path. The Salt Path has been one of the books that I am most likely to recommend for, I don't know, the last 5 or so years. I read it a while ago, I loved it. I think I read it as a library book, then I went and bought my own copy because I loved it that much. It is a book I've routinely recommended if somebody has asked, you know, what non-fiction book should I read or what nature writing should I read.
And it's illegal.
It's illegal. I have often said, oh, read The Salt Path. It is really inspiring and encouraging and an easy read, and it really kind of connects you to this beautiful part of the UK. A summary for this book, if you haven't read it, is The Salt Path follows Raina and her husband Moth as they walk the coastal path around Devon and Cornwall. They walked this path at a time in their lives where they had lost their home, lost their jobs, and Moth had been diagnosed with a terminal brain condition. And it was like partly a thing to occupy themselves after losing everything, and also like to tick it off the bucket list and just to do this adventure before time ran out on them. And The Salt Path follows them on this journey and kind of talks about homelessness. It talks about Devon and Cornwall, it talks about the environment, and it talks about the different people they meet along the way. And then, as I'm sure you'll already know if you're watching this video, The Observer in the last couple of weeks has revealed an investigation that they've had into the author and have uncovered some quite shocking things about the author's past. So Raina Wynn's story doesn't seem to be the same as what has been presented in the book. If you have somehow not read the articles yourselves, I suggest that you do. They're in The Observer. The main cause of controversy is that in the book, Raina says that her and her husband Moth lost their home because of a loan they invested into their friend's company, and things went wrong and their house got reclaimed in that debacle, and they kind of portray it as they got cheated by their friend. This investigation has uncovered that it seems like Raina Wynn, whilst working as an accountant for her friend's business, embezzled over £60,000 from that company, and when she got caught, she and Moth scrambled together to find money to repay them, and they did repay the company that she had scammed. But to do that, she had to take out a loan with somebody else, with a friend or a family friend. And then later on, that family friend's business went bust, and then the loan was reclaimed, and that's how they lost everything. The article also says that whilst they were saying that they were homeless, they owned land in France. Now, I think the article and Raina's response has been that there is a ruin on the land, not a livable place, but still property that perhaps could have been sold. So the first big controversy is that Raina was more responsible than she lets on for the situation they were in at the start of the book. The second thing that has been called into question is the exact nature of Moth's illness. The journalist questioned several experts, I think 9 experts, in the disease that Moth has and is meant to have in this book, and all of the experts have said that it would be very, very, very unusual for somebody with this specific condition to have lived 18 years since being diagnosed without having a huge decline in health and well-being. And at the moment, from what people can see of his public life, Moth isn't showing those kind of extreme symptoms. And there's been a bit of back and forth. Raina's published her own rebuttal to the article and has included letters from the doctors quoting this condition that he has. I've read the letters and there seems to be some... There's something about there's like one kind of diagnosis and another kind of diagnosis, and I'm not sure which one he falls into and what they all mean. Again, I'm not a medical expert, I don't fully understand it, but there's also this extra thing of a landlord who ended up giving them a house to live in after this book came out said at one point Raina and Moth told him that Moth is likely to die before Christmas that year, and this guy was absolutely devastated. And then he only found out after her second book was published, which ends in Moth miraculously recovering his health and getting a lot stronger, that he's fine. And they didn't bother to kind of let him know in between that Moth was okay. And in fact, from the timeline suggested in the book, it seems like the same time that they were telling this landlord that Moth was going to be passing away soon was also the same time that he was getting the news that actually his condition had improved to the point where a brain scan had shown that the deterioration in his brain had been reversed. That occurs in the book Landlines, which I have read but I don't have with me because I read it, again I borrowed it from the library, and I thought it was okay, but it didn't captivate me the same way as The Salt Path did. I feel really gutted about this. I feel gutted that it seems like the whole truth hasn't been told, and gutted that a book that I thought was quite wholesome and beautiful and sweet is now tarnished. And I also feel very called out because I've been reading people's reactions to this on social media, and quite a few people are saying that I always knew something was wrong. I always found it hard to believe that it unfolded like this and this. And one person even put, I avoided reading this book all this time because it was only ever recommended by annoyingly twee people. And I feel very called out because I was one of these annoyingly twee people. I still am an annoyingly twee person who read this book, loved it, and recommended it to other people. Oh, poor naive Cathy. So I feel a bit sad about this, and I kind of just wanted to come on and record my feelings as somebody who has really enjoyed this book and recommended it to other people, and really enjoys this genre of writing, of nature writing and travel writing. And I guess the big thing I feel is like, I won't want to read this book again now. It all feels a bit icky. And it feels icky because, for one, like, stealing from a company that you are working for, it's just a horrible, horrible thing to do. That just makes me feel uncomfortable. It also makes me feel uncomfortable with this question of, has there been deceit over the exact nature of Moth's health conditions, especially when reading this and reading Landlines, it does seem to me that Raina makes a case that the extreme walking that they do contributes to Moth's health improving. That is the narrative of these books. In fact, this book and Landlines, and I think the third book, which I haven't read, all begin with Moth's health being in awful state, and then they go on this long adventure. His health improves rapidly and he's feeling a lot better by the end of the walk and the end of the book. And there is a correlation made in Raina's writing to his health and the walks. I mean, that's a dangerous thing to do. Even if you're not being deceitful, you have to be very careful with how you phrase these things. And I think the time she is, and she tries to say, I'm not giving medical advice, but this is our story. But if there's any doubt over whether that is exactly their story and whether this is a condition, if what's been presented isn't what happened, then I just think that is a really low thing to do. So many people suffer from long-term illnesses and are presented or put under pressure a lot of ways. If you only did this, if you did that, if you did that, you'd get better. And, you know, on top of being ill, to have that pressure and expectation put on you too, I just think that's really low, and false hopes and anything that could misinform people of how they're handling their own health conditions. You just have to be so careful, and this all just feels a bit sour. There's still time for things to unfold, I guess, and a different narrative to come out, but right now it all just feels a bit icky. And you know, I have seen some people point out that actually, if she'd been honest about the situation she was facing as they set off on their Salt Path walk, if she had said, this is what had happened, I had made some awful choices. I had been found out. We tried to fix things, we pulled out this huge loan, we repaid the business, and then it all went wrong and we lost our home. We had this property in France, we couldn't sell it, and lots of people were angry with us maybe, so we wanted to lay low. And so we started off on this journey together. And if that had been the starting premise, and then the book was about this transformative walk that they did whilst perhaps processing what had just happened to them really, that would still have made a very interesting book. You know, lots of people have pointed out that the idea of two middle-aged people kind of on the run after embezzling a company out of lots of money by walking the salt path and camping out in tents could have been a very interesting and dynamic story. And it could have been. You know, that level of honesty could have brought something really interesting to this book. But you know, even then, there would still have been the issue with hypocrisy, which is perhaps the third reason why I am not keen to read this book again. Because what happens in this book, which happens in lots of books where people go on a long journey and record what happens, is that it's filled with anecdotes of the different people they meet along the way. So, you know, they get up one day, they go somewhere, they meet somebody interesting in a shop, on a campsite, another tourist, another backpacker, somebody else who's homeless maybe a shopkeeper, and they meet, and then they'll have a conversation, an interaction, and then Raina will pull out of that interaction a kind of thought that leads to her looking at society with a wider lens. So if somebody kind of gave her a funny look in a shop because she's scruffy, because she's sleeping, you know, in a tent and camping and all of this, and is walking a long way, and she feels judged for being homeless, then she'll talk about society's attitude towards the homeless. She often makes a judgment of that person. That person, you know, gave me a funny look, they must feel this way about the homeless, but they don't know what I've gone through. And the trouble with that is, like, you have a 5-minute interaction with somebody in their day and you've no idea what's actually going on in their head or what's going on in their life or what they're battling. They're not going to have a chapter to explain their outlook on the world. You've just met them for 2 minutes and are using them for fodder to fill your pages. And the second annoying thing about that, though, is if you are going to pull out assessments of other people's characters based on your interactions, I guess you could do it if you want, but you better not be somebody who embezzled a company out of £60,000, because that's just not going to fly, is it? I've seen some people saying, well, does it matter if parts of this aren't true? Like, we all know that, you know, books can be fiction and different perspectives happen and people's memories are different to one another. Does it matter if this story is true or not? And I feel like it does matter. I think if a book is sold as non-fiction, then I expect to read non-fiction. There is a level of trust and respect between the author and reader that is really important to maintain. And I think authors of non-fiction books do owe their readers the truth. I think publishers owe readers the truth if they are selling non-fiction books. You know, and publishers do have contracts with authors that put the onus on the author to be bringing the truth to their work. They are legally responsible for that. Fiction's wonderful. I love reading fiction. But non-fiction has a magic of its own. And that magic is that it is reflecting the real world back to us. It is exploring the reality of our existence and showing us powerful and interesting and important things in nature, in our history, in science, in our lives. And that has a power. And we can read non-fiction and know that this is relying on people's memories, and memory isn't absolutely perfect. And we know that this involves people's perspective, and we know that scientific thought and research reveals different things at different times, and we accept all of that. But there is this core trust that as far as the author knows it to be, they are saying the truth. And I do think that's really important. And non-fiction is so valuable because it is true, because it helps us to connect to our lives. It helps us connect to our world. It helps us to understand our history and where we came from. It helps us to explore with more meaning and knowledge and insight the world we live in. And I think that's a beautiful gift of non-fiction. And that's why it matters that non-fiction authors tell the truth. And I should say as well, you know, reading this book meant that the next time we went to Devon, I made sure we went to the town where along the pier, that was quite a bit of a walk for us with a toddler at the time, to go... That was you, Ola. We had you were a toddler, and I made us walk quite a bit of a way to go see up close this huge statue of a woman who's pregnant, and she's holding up a sword, and like you can kind of see into a pregnant belly to see the baby on one side, and then on the other side she's just like this gorgeous woman. Really interesting statue. And without reading this book, I would never have known it existed, and I never would have sought it out. And I'm really glad that I went to see it. And so in part, I won't regret having read this, because at the core, there is a beautiful, beautiful story here. And I hope that most of it is true. I really do hope that it is. But I won't really be able to read it and enjoy it again, because once you believe somebody is happy to lie to you, you'll just be constantly questioning whether they're telling you the truth or not. So I don't see me reading this again, but I'm glad that I read it and I got some valuable real life experiences from reading it. And that's why I feel like this genre of writing is really special. I love reading about the UK, and I love reading about our history and places to go and see, especially if they're things that I didn't know about before, because then I love that I can go and explore it and see it for myself. So I really do want to keep reading this genre, even if I don't keep reading The Salt Path. And I thought I'd end this vlog by just recommending a nature writer to read instead. If you want to explore this, but perhaps you want to read somebody who isn't wrapped in controversy right now, can I recommend to you a hidden treasure of an author called Jessica Lofthouse. She is my hidden gem. She was a Lancashire author who wrote books primarily in the 1940s and I think the 1950s a little bit. And she's just this amazing woman. She lived in Blackburn. She would get on the bus at the weekend, travel into the lakes, sometimes with friends, but often on her own. And she would just go exploring and walking. And she wrote these books accounting for her journeys, and she recorded the people that she met and the places that she went and the things she learned. And her writing is really beautiful. And she writes about people with such warmth and respect. I wrote an essay on one of her books, Off to the Lakes, for my degree. She was also an author who my grandma loved, and she had a copy of her book, Off to the Lakes, and would go on some of the walks, and my dad had it and then I read it. Off to the Lakes is particularly beautiful to read because she recorded a year of her walks in the lakes, but it was the year that World War II ended. So she encounters soldiers, she encounters refugees, she meets farmers whose work has been disrupted by the war, and she's actually in the lakes on VE Day and joins an impromptu celebration. And
that's so sweet.
It is really, really sweet. And she wrote quite a few books, and apparently she was on BBC Radio from what I could discover about her life, but history has kind of forgotten her since. When I was writing essays about her for my degree, I really struggled to find any sources about her life. I only found one or two local ones, but her books are excellent, and if you ever see them, you'll have to search them out a bit in second-hand bookshops, but they are worth getting and worth reading. So yeah, I just thought I'd end with a recommendation of somebody who I think is a very wholesome writer who makes you feel good about life. And if The Salt Path has left a bit of a hole in your shelves or in your reading journey, let me recommend Jessica Lofthouse to you. Anyway, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!
Scandal!
Scandal!